Hello everyone, welcome to this session. My name is Suchit Anand, and on behalf of the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all for this particular session where we'll have a panel discussion as well on Agrisemantics. So we are really thankful to the organizers to organize the sessions and to Chris and Brett and everyone, all the panel speakers as well who have come together to share their ideas as well. So I first want to give a small introduction to Godan and what we are doing as well. And I thought to look into this one aspect, of open science, and I want to look into it in two different ways. Basically, open science as microphone. Is it better? Okay. So I want to look into open science from two perspectives. From the science perspective of improving reproducibility of science and transparency, but also from making science open to everyone. And I mean to the wider community. And today morning I was very interested to listen to one of the keynotes who was talking about even in open kind of knowledge systems like the Wikipedia, how much it's only focused on one language. And I come from India, the south part of India, and I saw this interesting graphic on that small circle in Asia. Contains more people, about half of the world's population. And when I saw that, I was I was thinking, even if there is more than half of the world population coming from this small circle, when you look at the open or even the knowledge abilities and the open education opportunities, it's very limited to the developing world. And for me, it's very important. When I look into science and education, that's why I have been working in open education and open science for now more than 15 years. And I have seen, there's a lot of, I have seen the progress, and there were also a lot of challenges as well on the way. And for me, that's what I look for the future as well. How we make sure, especially colleagues from the developing world, they also have access to the tools and technologies and data, for their needs as well. And obviously, there's a huge digital divide, and this is something, from Godan, we are very keen to look into how we, we bring together partnerships from around the world to address this specific issue as well. So in Godan, we focus on the, all these amazing developments. It's a fact that even today, more than 800 million people are suffering from malnutrition, and that's why, that's the whole purpose of why Godan is working on. We want to make sure we address this problem, and the only way we believe that open data is going to be very key to help us solve this problem and open innovation. And that's why this particular session later on semantics is very important for Godan, because we want to see how this open data is actually creating a purpose for us. So it's not just releasing the data, but we want to have that data achieve a purpose, and that's for zero hunger. So what's Godan? We are a globally distributed. We advocate, support, and enable global efforts to make agricultural and nutritional data available, accessible, usable for unrestricted use worldwide. So our secretariat is based in the McGill University in Canada now. So it was based in the UK, till last year. So it's now moved to Canada, and it's a voluntary partner network. And we have been who all joined together with a joint statement of purpose. And anyone, any organizations are welcome to join as long as they agree to the open data ideology and principles. So for me, as I told before, it's not open data for the sake of open data. What's the purpose of what we are doing? And there are two key things I can think about that is very important. One is, how can open data enable zero hunger for all? And also, how can we use open data to help smallholder farmers? And if you think about it, the world's most poorest people are dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods. So if we can increase their income even by 20%, it's a big increase. It's like a orbit shift for the whole livelihood. So from a Godan perspective, we are keen to work with partners who are working with the smallholder farmers and try to see how we can work together to improve the livelihoods. And I just want to quickly give some background of how Godan started. So Godan started in, there was a G7 meeting in Maryland, USA in 2013, and that was the initial start. The leaders came together and they saw that open data in agriculture is very important, and that started the whole idea of Godan. And in December 2014, I was just looking at how it changed in the last 5 years, and from a very few number of organizations joining, when I looked, this month, we have now grown over 1,000 partners worldwide, and it's from governments, from industries to research organizations to universities. So the whole idea is we bring together the bringing together of all these organizations to help spread the idea of opening more data. That's the most important thing. And what we hope to do is to encourage not only the organizations which are already here, but if any of you are not yet joined, please make sure you join us and see the benefits of open data sharing and making open innovations from it. So I wanted to show there are so many examples, but because I come from, my background is in geospatial science, so I thought I would give you one example from that team, because if you look at agriculture data, anything from weather data to climate data, all are very important for agriculture monitoring. And for example, the remote sensing data alone, it's a very key aspect for agriculture monitoring. And how many of you know about the Landsat data? Anybody use it? Okay, great. Okay. So for those of you who don't know Landsat data itself, it's from from the United States. It's actually the longest running civilian Earth observation program, and it started in 1972. But what was very interesting was in 2009, they had a free and open policy, and they released the whole data. And it's very interesting to see the uptake of from that 2009 to now, and we don't have the data flow, but it just the whole impact just was increasing at a huge rate. And the most interesting thing is the economic benefits as well to the governments which started opening up the data. So if that was not open, you will not see the impact on display. And what we hope to do is to encourage more governments to think about, rather than having the data, not open, try to make sure they make it available for the general public. And so as I mentioned before, Godan works in this 0-100, and I really like this. I saw this SDG tracker. I don't know if any of you have seen this one, but this is very interesting way for us to know why. In fact, the parasocial data, why even semantics is very important, because we have all this data, and even today, even for the SDG indicators, we have around 232 SDG indicators, but even for those ones, many of them, the green ones means that the data is, we have the data which is available for that indicator from the official metrics are there. But the red ones and the yellow ones are the ones which we have to do more work on. So even though the open data movement is having big momentum, there is a lot of work that's still needed to be done. And so that's why it's very important to not only even with the open data is available, but how do we make sure we link those data sets for to get meaning and context from all this information. So from Godan, we have been working in different levels. So we work with ministers. So this is one example in Africa. Where we in 2 years back in 2017, we brought together the agriculture ministers from various African countries, and to help them develop a strategy for open data in agriculture and nutrition. And this is very important for us to make sure we have the support and help from the ministerial level to move forward things. And after this Nairobi declaration, a lot of things have happened in Africa in opening up the data in agriculture and nutrition. So that's one aspect of how we work at the government level. But also I want to talk about how we want to make sure we listen to the people in at the local level. And one example is I was at the so through Godan we run these think tanks, and the idea of these think tanks is to bring together key stakeholders from governments, from universities, academia, and NGOs to share their experiences on how open data is important to them. And this, one of the think tanks we did was in Nairobi in an organization called the Regional Center for Mapping and Rural Development. And from a developing country perspective, open data alone is not no good. For example, one of the outputs from this think tank, based on the feedback, was for them it's not just open data. Where are the open tools for them to make use of the open data? So unless you provide the open tools, just having the open data alone is no good for the developing countries. So we changed our whole strategy to make sure, and that's why, now I come back to open science. For us, we believe open science is a key enabler for capacity development and empowerment for all, especially in the developing world. And we cannot ignore the developing world. From here, when I come here, maybe how many people are from the developing world here? Four people. So in some conference when I go, I'm the only one. So it's very important to have their voices heard. And so for me, that's why I always think that we need to make sure people from the developing world, they can also be part of the digital kind of economy. We need to make sure they also have these open science principles as key. So it's not just open data, open standards to make sure it's interoperable, open access to research publications, open educational resources, and open software. So all these coming together is a big enabler for developing countries also to be part of this. Otherwise, all the colleagues in developing countries will be left out of all these developments. So we are very keen to make sure that the digital economy is for everyone. It's not going to exclude anyone. It's not only the big players, but everyone from the smallholder farmer to to the big organizations. They all benefit from this. And in this, around the time GoDAN has been working, there's a lot of changes that has happened in the whole open data landscape. So from the link to open data, and in 2015, you have the fair data principles all happening. And when I think for the future, what is going to happen in the next 5 years, so it's a very interesting time to be working in this area. And for me, you can never predict the future, but what we can do, especially in technology, we can look at the patterns. What are the patterns that's happening in this whole area? And in 2016, at the G20 summit, the leaders promised to support appropriate efforts to promote open science and facilitate appropriate access to publicly funded research on fair principles. And so this was the start. But I see, it's very, very important we have the leadership of all the key countries coming together to support open science. And what is the result of it? I just want to show one from the Europe. So even in just the European Union, now we have the European Open Science Cloud. And a lot of developments happening in the open science. So I'm very optimistic in the next 5 years, we will see the whole equation change for open science, not only in Europe, but from US and other countries as well. So I want to finish off by one question actually. Maybe in the panel discussions, they will have more ideas on this. But for me, one of the things I have been always trying to do is how can we give more opportunities for students in digital agriculture projects. And one example was, a couple of years back, we worked with NASA to run this challenge called the NASA World Wind Challenge. And this was open to all universities and for researchers to look into areas where they could find local farming challenge. And we've had some amazing projects which were developed by students all over the world. And the winning project was this one. They developed in less than 3 weeks, and it was high school students from. It was not even university students. It was high school students from USA who developed this app called NASA Agrisemantics. And they put together data from over 100 years of historical agricultural and climate data all into a mobile phone. And what I then realized was, now, with all these semantic technologies and all these expertise here, I really hope, we will be able to get these experts to work with these students as well in future for real-world agriculture programs. So I want to thank everyone for this opportunity, and I want to also specifically thank Chris and all the panel speakers who will be coming here for this panel. And I want to encourage all of you to ask your questions to the panels as well. So thank you very much.
Can I ask the panel to come and take their seats, please? It should be in the background. So, any of the audience has a question, you either put your hand up and ask questions at any time, or if you're a little bit shy, please go to menti.com, put that code in, and hopefully the questions will pop up there. So the first question we have for the panel is please introduce yourself and give your background in the semantic background. Let's start from left.
Thanks. Yes, Jens Holunder, working for Bayer Crop Science in Field Solution Technologies. So there I'm dealing with pipeline development and data science to basically enable informative or making better informative decisions by using semantics. I came across semantics most likely 9 to 10 years ago, still in the field of bioinformatics and systems biology.
Monica Solanki from Agrimetrics, UK. We are building a big data platform for the agri-food sector. So the idea is to tie up all relevant data sources that are important for the agri-food sector using ontologies, exposing the integrated data as linked data, and in general making the hard task somewhat easier in terms of providing integrated data sets as a ready-to-use API for people who are interested in agri-food data. My background in semantics goes back a long way. Since my PhD, I've been working with semantics in all forms, and yeah, very happy to be on the panel today.
Hi, I'm Fernanda Doria. I am a veterinarian by background, and I did my PhD developing systems to analyze animal disease data to track trends of animal disease and detect outbreaks earlier. My supervisor was a computer scientist, and as the challenge of gathering data to inform decision makers on animal disease control, as the challenge got bigger and more data sources, and I started thinking about how we're going to harmonize or how we're going to integrate these disparate data sources, my supervisor told me, what you need is an ontology, and I believed him, and 5 years later I'm still fighting the fight.
So, hello, I'm Marie-Angélique Laporte. I work for the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT. So we are one of the CG Center, and so I've been working on semantics and ontology specifically since my PhD. And yeah, for biodiversity, I'm part also of this big data platform that we have, and we have this big platform named Guardian, where we try to make like all the CGIAR data and publication accessible from one point, and we try to use semantic technology to help the people finding the data more easily.
Thank you. And for the people who didn't turn up to my tutorial yesterday, would the panel please explain what Agrisemantics is?
I have to be honest that before I enter here, I'm not using this term. However, I see here two things coming together. I see all the opportunities which we have in agriculture to bring it together and use semantics to enable new data models and new concepts.
So for me, agri-semantics can mean many things, but I really see as this a very strong force of bringing together fragmented communities. The agri-food sector is quite wide, and there are different communities looking at different problems, but in the end they are all linked up. The world, the agri-food world is an interlinked world, and agri-semantics can provide us with a very powerful mechanism to bring all these diverging viewpoints together, and collectively, by giving meaning to all these diverse information sources, we can come up with something so powerful that can provide us answers to critical questions that the sector is facing today. So I see agri-semantics as making a very big difference to the way information integration is being done in this area today.
Can I really add anything to that? Thank you, Monica, for that. On the word that Monica just mentioned of, everything connected for agriculture and food production and feeding people, and I come from such a specific field, so I'm only worried about the livestock, the animals produced for food, and by background, they only come to me when they're sick. Understanding I started trying to model all the data about sick animals, then I understood the challenge of modeling animal production to begin with, and that's my entry point into this. So I come from one of these small things that will get connected in this big hub of agricultural semantics. And it's still new to me, the whole perspective, but I'm really glad that I came to it through a world where everything is linked and where we know where the links are. And that's where I come into. So I'm just one small circle trying to tap into that big hub of agriculture semantics.
Yeah, and I think we are all just small part of this big initiative, and really if we want to reach like this big agri-semantic graph, we can only do that by working together, because the domains are so different. You need so many domains and different types of data are involved in this big agri-food system that, I think it's really about cooperating, because no one can really try to start describing everything for everyone. So that's really cool also to have this opportunity to be sitting here with different types of people working on different domain, and to try also how we can work together to bring like this big Agrisemantics to life.
Thank you for the panel answering that question. Just a reminder to the audience, you can please ask questions.
So a very long time ago, I did my postgrad work on modelling animal production and the growth of grass. My first employment was actually here in Edinburgh, working for the Agricultural Advisory Service. And then I went off and I did healthcare and clinical data, which is what I was talking about today. So there's a definite sense of a circle here. The question to you is, the things that other people have been talking about in clinical research and healthcare, to what extent do you think there are directly transferable skills and knowledge and components and tools, rather than everybody going off and building their own individual things?
Thank you for that question.
I think we are not trying to reinvent something. I mean, I'm going to talk about this, the CGAR, what we do. So we have this community of practice on ontologies. And so the idea is like, we don't have all the skills as you mentioned, and so we invited people from all over the world, particularly for the medicine and life science to come and be part of the conversation, to help us and provide like the tools and the knowledge and the new skill that we need to be able to build more efficient system. So I don't think we try to really reinvent something, but we really try to build a community that where everyone can bring something to the table and try to build something new, but not starting from scratch.
So I think that this is a very new area of computer science compared to relational databases. For example, the history goes back 70 years, but semantic web-link data is just like 20 odd years, and things are still developing. I mean, even if you look at the state of our triple stores, they still struggle for scalability. I think what we really need, what the pattern I see in this community is, no one really has the patience to, first of all, evaluate someone else's tool rigorously and build on top of that, find the limitations and extend that. Instead, I think an easier way out is I'm going to start my own. And this happens all across, whether it is ontologies, whether it is, reasoners, whether it is tools. So I think we don't give ourselves enough chance, in the sense that we don't really allow ourselves the flexibility to work with maybe a tool which is still under development, or which some of the group has not been able to take forward and build on top of that. We all start building our own. So I think as a community, maybe there is something for us to learn here, that we need to probably, have some faith in the work done by others and extend and build on top of it and reuse those tools, rather than, starting off our own. It's a very easy thing to do, to start our own. The hard stuff is understanding what someone else has done and building on top of it.
think it's a very valid question, and we also have seen that in the pharmacy world, they are quite advanced compared to the agriculture where we are in, and we try to collaborate with them. But here still is the boundary of having the right standards or the right STEM standard that we can use or build on this.
Yeah, I think I mean, we all come from different communities, and I think the problems you raise, they exist in different ways for everyone. There is the problem of adding value to each other works, as Monica just said. How do you add value instead of restarting everything? I come from the public sector, and my problem is a bit of who is going to fund when, you know, everyone benefits, but nobody really profits from it. So you're constantly trying to reuse things, but at the same time trying to convince those people that you're not redoing what they did, you're trying to add value to it. So there is the technical challenge of not reinventing. Then there is the normative challenge, there is the political will. It's not easy. And the things what I wanted to point out, we all come from different communities and we all face that challenge. But I'm really hopeful for initiatives where you try to bring people together, like what you were talking about, or Maria Angelique was talking about, that you try to bring people together so they are aware of what each other is doing and they can aim to go in the same direction and add value to what each other is doing. But yeah, you're right.
Thank you. We actually have our first question from Menti. So a lot of the existing resources we have in Agrisemantics have kind of from Western culture. So do you know of any resources that take into account indigenous practice?
Oh, sorry, no, I didn't mean to take it from the airport, you were struggling.
I suppose, I'm not really aware of any resources as such, but I can see the problem why there are no such resources available. Maybe because building these things requires quite a lot of investment. And the countries where you would expect these to bring in the most benefit, as Suchit just mentioned in his talk in the previous session, that they are struggling to even get by on a day-to-day basis, and for them to invest in these kind of technologies is still a long way off. So in the West we have a lot of funding. I mean, how many EU projects on semantic web link data have been funded in the last 15 years? I mean, I can't even count. There are so many of them. So this is one good example where if you can get the government of these countries to fund these projects, then I'm sure we will see some improvement in that area.
I really want to ask you to intervene as well, because I mean, you've worked in Brazil and we have the exactly opposite. I mean, I come from Brazil and now I work in Europe, and you're from Europe and now you work in Brazil, or you've worked in Brazil. And sitting here now, I work in Sweden now, and seeing some of those initiatives reaching out to developing countries, sometimes it's hard for me not to see that there is a little bit of the colonizer, you know, you develop something that you think they need, but are you really taking into account what they need? So I would be interested in seeing what you saw, Brett, working in Brazil so long.
The responsibility back. Thank you very much. What I saw, because I lived in São Paulo, and essentially was sugarcane everywhere. So you have monocultures there, and there is pressure on agricultural land, where 40% of that sugarcane will end up in petrol tanks. And it seems that what should be traditional in Brazil is completely withdrawn, and there's little or no resources for it. Now, I come from natural language processing, and there are efforts to support rare languages. And perhaps rather than companies and governments of poor countries, where basically they have better things to spend their money on and feeding the population, maybe it's for the FAO or GODAN, which are kind of transnational companies, to try to support some native products, for example. And this kind of leads us on to the second question from Menti.com, and it's probably going to get the same answer. Do you know of any semantic resources or semantic efforts to actually support neglected language? Neglected or rare language?
Yes, but not languages per se, but that's true. I mean, our user, if we build all of that and trying to build these platforms to leverage all the data as you presented before, I think for me, like the real end user at the end is really like the farmer. So in my case, it's a smallholder farmer. So, and of course they talk different languages, there's all this dialect and all this local variety, local practices and all of that. And I think that should be really the important thing, is like to keep in mind that they are the user of what we do, or they should benefit directly from what we are doing. So yeah, but I don't have anything to say about languages per se.
No, me neither. I was just going to compliment something I didn't say in the question before. And I don't know how much it taps into this, because we were talking about these, what we were talking about the question before. Because I'm aware of at least one initiative, and it's an app, and it makes me think about the panel last year when they discussed the whole thing with African countries, for instance, and the mobile network, and how much they kind of jumped there. They jumped a few steps compared to what was expected, and the power of mobile apps now in Africa. And I know of at least one mobile app supported by some semantic tools where not veterinarians, but people going to farms and trying to diagnose diseases, they can put in the clinical signs that was developed in Ethiopia, and they put in the clinical signs, and then that helps them figure out what disease that could be. And then as more people use the app, then you also have what's going on locally. And that app has been successful, and I think it was developed by funding from Europe, but also with local people. And that has been my experience in Brazil, that what we need is support with kind of building up. So I've had experience working in the Ministry of Agriculture in Brazil, where we would receive external consultants that would come trying to build models for us, but they really didn't understand our reality. So after they left, then we adapted the model to what we thought the reality was. So if they came with the view of we have to support the local people to develop something, it would really have worked, which is this app that I mentioned. It's a pity I can say that, I can't remember the name from the top of my head, but that it was developed with local people, and it is one successful experience, but not with neglected languages. I don't
This kind of leads on to another question. Although in the United States, and especially in the UK, the majority of the farms are quite large, but the majority of farmers in the world are smallholders. So do you think the current state of agrisemantics is actually ignoring smallholders? And just to talk about my personal experience in Brazil, is that out in the countryside we lack a lot of the infrastructure. For example, as I say, fast internet connections of any sort. So do you think it's the current state is ignoring smallholders for larger organizations?
No, I mean, yeah, please go ahead. I already did it like before. No,
What a damn.
I think if we go further on precision farming, we actually not neglecting, because this is most likely the way to go. But we also have to change our models, at least, let's say, from our company standpoint, because now we have product models to actually profit on the market, and it most likely has to go to outcome-based models to actually also support these kind of smallholder farms and so on. And I think also now, with the new technologies, having network over there and so on, I think it is a way it will be involved.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. I don't think that we are ignoring small holding farmers. The whole idea behind agri-semantics and semantics in general is to have a shared conceptualization or having a shared vocabulary across the community, and this should be openly available for all. So, which really tells me that anyone can consume it. Even regardless of whether you are a large organization, of course, if you're a big organization, you will have more technological resources to put Agrisemantics to a much wider use. But on the other hand, within their limited capacity, even small holding farmers can, to some extent, benefit at least from, if nothing else, at least from having the advantage of getting hold of a shared vocabulary of describing things. I mean, that's the least.
I think maybe we also have to use semantics on a certain point to dig into and to create new data models to actually also react against the change we see. Because some of the suffer because of the climate change and so on. So we have to react on this, or react on the resources, so we can actually create new models to identify, to only use a certain product in a certain dosage, and also minimize the water consumption. So really take care of the resources. And I guess this is also where we have to go, and to take those people.
No, but that's exactly what we do when we develop this work. So we worked on this agronomy ontology where we try to, as you said, take into account these parameters. So we go into fields, we run our experiments, and we are interested in seeing what is the impact of the management practices as on the yield or any other characteristics. So yeah, we really try to model that, and I think, so I don't think we are ignoring or not taking into account the model of the farmers. I think there are one use case, but I think what can work for big farms can also work for small farms.
I can't possibly add anything to that. I'm so far from the real field agriculture. Yeah, I can only hope. I mean that whatever knowledge generated by, maybe financed by big corporations can then be used to small. But maybe our representative from Godan could talk about what he how do you see the power of networks such as Godan to take the knowledge that's generated, by maybe big corporations, to take that knowledge and spread to the small ones, to really, how do you feel like Godan would be the way to spread out that knowledge? Or such networks, networks such as Godan?
I think the question is very important, but I can give you one example. For example, Godan is part of a, I don't know if you heard about the Blue Pod Earth observations. I showed the example from the remote sensing community. Okay, so they are giving the remote sensing imagery for a long time, but we found that, because I am in the program board of GEO, one of the things as soon as I sat on the board, one of the things I realized was, we have all these imageries, billions of pounds of dollars of investment from US and all these big governments going to the remote sensing community, but how much are they impacting, for example, the indigenous communities? And in fact, one of the things we did, because there was the ministerial, the GEO ministerial in Canberra, just 3 months back, and this was the first time we had an indigenous community practice for the GEO. And I think, maybe for the agriculture community, we might need to reach out to the indigenous people and have a community of practice set up. So this is a really good idea, and I will make sure I follow up with who is interested in this area, because I don't know, because indigenous communities are around the world. It's from Brazil to India to Australia. So it's very, and they cover so many languages and so many ethnic backgrounds and so many things. So it's very difficult to have a single kind of solution. But we need to bring together all these communities together that like GEO did, and try to find out how we can do that. Godan will be more than happy to work on this if anybody is interested.
Possibly frame the question badly is that I think there's implicit barriers to smallholders, and I only have experience in Brazil, and maybe it's not the semantic, but they won't have technological access. It also needs some education to use these systems. So I would think that people like Godan can actually help bridge that gap. It's probably a problem around the world. So
and
we,
the tools of CGI, I guess.
okay, so we have another question from the audience. Okay, and what they're saying is that the majority of the time that semantic technologies that they work with deal poorly with time. And so this seems critical, given the changes that will happen to climate change. Is this a problem? Any volunteers?
So I interpret this as the representation. I interpret this as the representation of time in the existing suite of ontologies that we have. Yes, that has been a big problem. Representing time and time series data has been a major issue, and several solutions have been proposed, but I haven't seen any solution that scales, be it at the level of the ontology or even if it's version control of linked data sets. And if we were to talk about using semantic web technologies to persist information which is related to time series or related to changes that happen over a period of time as far as climate change goes, yes, we will need more development in that area. I agree with that observation.
I also agree with this. I think I still remember we had a discussion yesterday at a dinner, exactly the same problem. Is there anything out that we can actually use for this? Because currently the semantics give us a little bit a snapshot or a frozen snapshot of the real world we are in, and nothing before to come to this snapshot.
I also think that temporal reasoning, as far as semantic web reasoners go, is, I think, a very abstract concept at the moment. Semantic web reasoners cannot reason at the temporal level. So if we have to scale the problem besides querying to reasoning, then we have another problem at hand. So this area really needs a lot of research.
So we have another question from the audience. It says, what current ag-semantic standards are in use? Which are obsolete, and what new standardization niches are necessary in core application domains?
I mean, at CGAR, we've been developing the crop ontologies. So there are ontologies for breeders to use in their field books. So when they go in the field, they can all collect the information in a nice way. And so this suite of ontology has been very successful so far. So, and I think they are used in several systems and databases, so that's very good. I think a lot of ontologies exist. Yesterday we looked at how many there was maybe 400 ontologies existing. So I think there's plenty of ontologies, but really like the main challenge now is really to know which one we should be using. So defining some sort of criteria that can be used to guide users that have data and they want to annotate them using ontology. So we need to find some way to do that. But really, yeah, I think most of the ontologies are a lot of ontologies are available. If you go to the Agro portal, that is like a portal to find ontologies that are relevant to the domain. You will find also a lot of ontologies. So really, like the key now is to find an easy way for the people wanting to use ontology to know which one they should be using.
Yeah, I mean, it's not anything special with agrisemantics, agriculture semantics. I guess any field you go, you have this plethora of ontologies and controlled vocabularies and where to use this. I realize now I failed to give my affiliation. I come from the National Veterinary Institute in Sweden. And then you have, you have a lot of regulation. We are mandated to report to the European Food Safety Agency. They have their own terminologies, but now I'm working with One Health, and we want to be able to connect with human data, and they report to the European Centers for Disease Control. They have their own way to deal with structural interoperability. But in my field, at least, there's a lot of effort into structural interoperability, synthetic interoperability, but not really semantic interoperability. And when we go into trying that, then there is all what I talked before, the political, the normative challenge, but then the technical challenge of scalability is also hard. So when we're trying to sell this, and the people on the domain knowledge, they don't really know how this comes into their world, where do they actually use this. Integrating to the world where they live is really hard, and because there are so many standards, then you come with a solution, they say, oh, we need one more solution, one more person. So I think the challenge is really showing that this is not one more, it's kind of, where does it unify? How, I really liked the presentation earlier about this, I think it was yours maybe, the semantic layer, and just trying to show how now we're trying to integrate and add value to this key. To me, the key is showing people we're adding value. We're not competing with what exists, we're not replacing, we're not reinventing the wheel, we're trying to finally just bring this all into practice in a ways that add values to what exists. We use that knowledge, but makes future-proof solutions, that it's not in 2 years you're gonna hear one more person coming with one more, but it's a bit, I kind of took a little bit as my responsibility if I'm coming to these words to show people the value and show them, you know, if your problem is you have 10 ontologies, 4 standards, 5 control vocabularies, I'm not going to be one more. I'm just kind of going to sit on top of this and try to connect things. But bringing that to practice and to the way people work on the everyday has been the biggest challenge I find. Because when I entered this world, everything was so new to me. So we had a consultant, and he kind of drew on the whiteboard the system they could build to integrate into the work we do in practice. And I remember my supervisor looked at it and just thought, and that's why it's so hard to adopt it, because it's so complex to bring it to the world we live now. So I think bringing it to practice so that people can see this as an added value rather than one more competing ontology or standard is at the moment in the community I come from the biggest challenge.
Yes, I think the question was, which are the
I spoke for so long that I forgot the question.
No, the question was...
Current standards, and which are the obsolete ones? And which ones are currently in use?
Well, I mean, we had this brief discussion on this yesterday at the tutorial, that AgriWalk seems to be the de facto standard in this area. AgriWalk is very comprehensive and it's multilingual, so it comes with that advantage. And it's quite a lightweight ontology, so it comes with that benefit as well. So I think within the space, AgriWalk is probably the standard one, and I'm not sure which are the obsolete ones. Probably there are none, because
Or maybe plenty.
or plenty. Well, there are 403 listed on the West Agri Portal website. So yeah.
I think I would just add what is maybe missing. I mean, if you're looking at Agrisemantics, then we might have a lot of ontologies. It doesn't matter if they're obsolete or not, but they are living in their little domain. And if you're looking at Agrisemantics, then you have biology, you have chemistry, you have breeding, you have farming, you have maybe even supply chain, you have the people who buy the product, and so on. So all these comes together on a certain point, and on this point you have to concatenate, or you have to make these different domains talking to each other. And maybe there we need some investment or some ontologies going this way.
But I think that's what's happening in a way, because I mean, like the Ogo family in the life science have been around for a long time, and that's really what they are trying to promote, like trying to have like a top domain on way of ontology to, and then that can be extended by different domains, and then at the end, even if you look at one ontology as being one domain, which is tools, so they can be taken apart, but they can be integrated easily within that framework. Yeah, no. In this overflow report, yeah, really easily, I think. Yeah, more or less easily. yeah, more or less easily. Particularly for the diseases and human diseases and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think that would be a way to go. Like, you know, instead, if we can, and also it has the advantage of then we can start also reusing tools for developing ontologies. We can, start sharing more, even if we want to focus on a small domain, and then we can take like this advantage of this big community. So I think that's.
So just a follow-up question: do you think standards are being divided by national interests and being divided between public and private organisations?
So I would say yes. So we have our own ontology team, of course, at the company, and they are collaborating intensively with the community. So they are, of course, consuming the ontologies, but they're also proposing new terms and exchanging with the ontologies of the community. Of course, we're also building our own ontology, let's say reference master data set, to build our own product towards the selling market. And some of those assets will not be shared. But in a nutshell, what can be shared will be shared.
So I work for a company, what can I say, everything is closed source. So we are doing some very, very good work on ontology development. We have some very nice ontologies that come with a lot of expressivity and that can help describe a lot of knowledge in the domain. We are hoping, at least I'm hoping at some point, someone will decide that, okay, it's fine to contribute this back to the community, make it publicly available. But till that happens, I'm afraid it'll be closed source. Nevertheless, I still try my best to reach out to the ontology developers out there and contribute as much as I can. But I agree with you that we do have this kind of segmentation between different viewpoints and between different stakeholders and what they want from the models they are building. So unless there is a pre-competitive space where these people can come together and simply discuss evolution of knowledge rather than what's in it for me, I'm afraid this will remain.
And that's totally driven by the fundings.
Yes.
I mean, that's why there's national initiative as well, because some fundings are French, German, whatever. So yeah, I think that's also the reason why we are seeing like all these different ontologies and initiatives, and they are not coming together. I think, as you said, I think we need something a space where we can do that. But yeah, we need to find money for that also, and that's quite different from what is currently. Yes.
No, I do not have much to add to this. Only that, I mean, my experience trying with the funding is, with the cycle of funding is that, well, I come from the public sector, so, and in quite an European level, so that maybe the national and private public is less an issue for me. But what I did learn is that if I spend the funding of a 3 years project investing on content to the ontology, rather than building a community that will keep it going, then the project finishes and that initiative dies with it. And then you're hoping that a new project will fund it and it will pick it up and will revive it, and it's really hard. So I think initiatives like the CGR, and I mean, I mentioned Godan yesterday, just so you understand how new everything is to me. Yesterday I was asking Chris, give me the elevator page of what I should know about CGR and Godan, and he said Godan is why you should do open data, CGR is how. And if you look at the website from CGR and the community of practices and the working groups and these initiatives to bring them together, I think it's the only way we're going to fight the funding cycle. It's the only way, I believe, in the initiative I had to start some sort of animal ontology, because I can't work on that anymore, but if I can deliver to a community that can pick it up and keep it going. So it's hard for us to keep preaching the interoperability and the linked if we don't develop ourselves tools that we're ready to let the community pick up when your own funding dies. So I think that's our job.
So this leads very nicely to the next audience question, is who should pay for the new to be shared agri-semantic models? Who should pay for the new to be shared agri-semantic models? And considering that the companies are leveraging free resources but keeping their own resources private, perhaps private companies should be paid.
I would say that these new data model will be lead in a kind of product which will be delivered, and over this we can finance this kind of things. So we are collaborating with to certain projects, industry programs, and so on, as a company, to with our expertise to help driving things.
So I don't think so that just expecting private companies to fund the yet to be launched new data model or the newly curated data model to contribute to the community. I don't think so that would work. I think we need a much bigger agenda than that. What is it that we are trying to do? Is it just showcasing the next new data model, or is it contributing to the knowledge in the domain? Because ontologies are all about conceptualizing knowledge in a structured way so that they can be used in many different ways. And I think we need a combination of companies, domain experts, whether they're coming from universities or coming from non-profit organizations, I don't know. But we need to establish a platform where these things can be discussed. And of course, the initial funding to get this up and running might come from a maybe small selection of companies who do understand the requirement of this shared knowledge and how it can contribute, just like what happened with schema.org. So schema.org is a great resource that is being used so widely, but this is because some companies decided that the web search as a whole needed this. Similarly, I think a group, maybe with some initial funding, takes the ownership of this and drives this forward, and then it should be organic from there. I don't know how this model will work. Maybe, you know, a kind of business model or something could be thought about around this. But just expecting private companies to drive this end to end, I don't think so would yield any solutions.
Yeah, you said it. I think, I mean, as I said before, the technical challenge is solved by having something that in theory is interoperable. So you get funding, you develop, you put out there. If you want to use it, you end up contributing to it. The problem I'm having is, for instance, I come from the public sector that produces data on animal diseases, right? And if I have a vision that that should be integrated with human data, then I want to convince my agency that our data should be put out in a way that is linkable. But it's hard, so then in a way, if I am taking the overhead of doing that so others can connect to my data, it's hard for them to see that these benefits you were generating the data. So if I'm generating my data in better ways so that my data can be fair, so my data can be fair for others to use, so why am I taking the overhead of making my data usable to others? What does that solve for me? But then, at least in the European Union, there is a lot of push that if you get funding, those data, you should strive for things that are open. There is a requirement now for countries to put out open data, and however people understand that, or how far they want to go with the open. I mean, open is one thing, usable is another thing. So, yeah, I don't have an answer. Just I'm ruminating on the problem, and I think we all are. But I think at least what we came here to discuss, all those problems, and we're all working in an environment that has the problems. But I'm hopeful about the technical solutions and how they can help a little bit. I heard once, you can't do science without politics, but you can do politics without science. So if we don't try to live in their world, it's not like the politics behind all of this will try to include us. It's a fight we have to fight every day, and we have to fight to be heard and to be included. I don't think we're going to solve this in a conference like this, but at least we are. It's good that we're all thinking about it and help each other think about it. But at least the technical challenge behind it, I think we're helping to solve.
I think we should not do things just of the sake to develop new data models and so on. I mean, at the end, what is really critical, and this is really important, is to have tangible use cases that really say this use case is part of this domain and we can solve it. and then we can find ways how we can solve it together with different work streams or however we want to do this.
Yeah, and the money will come once you can demonstrate that it's useful, like, you know, with good use cases, then it will be easier to get like more money, I think. So it would be like a good side.
So I'm going to disagree with a little bit with the panel. So to give you the example of the machine learning world, where a lot of the major frameworks are actually developed by private companies and donated to the community. So TensorFlow, for example. And I'm wondering why we're not seeing this in the semantic web world. It's another discussion. So we have another question from the audience, essentially saying that agrisemantics, along with precision and digitization of agriculture, is just another case of technology push that does not correspond to the real need of the farmers and the environment. Would anyone agree with this statement or argue against it?
I think if we keep in mind that our users are the farmers, we should be able to leverage everything coming from this digital world to really develop tools that can be used by them directly and that will benefit them. So I would disagree with this statement, and I would say that, I mean, if we do our job correctly and we think in terms of standards, I mean, the standards are really at the beginning, and we can link the correct standard to the data, and then we build like really tools that can reach like all users. Then, I mean, they can directly benefit from these technologies.
Maybe I'm not the best person to answer the question because I do work at the population level, and I mean, it's where I operate. It's combating diseases at the population level, not at individual level. But I would answer this question going back to the user case. What's your user case, and if your user case is benefit back to the farmer, are you making sure that that happens? Because we have, just to cite one example, I have a project where my job is to control diseases at the population level, but I can't do that without data from the farmers. How do you convince farmers to voluntarily give you their data so that you can control whether there's an outbreak happening? So we conceived this idea that we would get data registered at the computers of the farmers. They were using the same program. If we can get those data and transform into something useful at the farm level and return to them an interface that allows them to monitor production losses and effectiveness of their reproduction at the farm level, that maybe they would buy the solution at the cost of their own data. So they agree to be in the program, which means the software gets installed on their computer for free, but the software sends back centrally some statistics. And those statistics would be very anonymized, very generalized, just for us to have an idea whether there is an outbreak happening at the population level. And when we met with the farmers on the field, they wanted to send way more data back centrally, because they said, I want to be able to compare myself and benchmark myself against the others, so I want to send you way more data than anonymized, or I want you to be able to compare my farm and tell me when I'm doing poorly. So I go back to depends on your user case, and sometimes what you think the user needs is different from what you think. So are you ignoring farmers? In what user case? I would say it's a matter of user case, and within your user case, you have to make sure you go back and you listen to your stakeholder.
I totally agree. I don't think so. It's a problem with the technology. I think, well, it's a problem with the people who are doing technology, because they are totally technology driven and they probably are not listening to the farmers. On the other hand, it could also be that farmers, because they're so scared of losing the competitive edge, they're not really highlighting their problems to the extent that they should, so that technology can help them solve the problem. Right? So I think we need to listen to each other. The technologists, again, it's got nothing to do with technology. It's agrisemantics. Agrisemantics is capable of solving the problems as long as those problems are well understood by the people who are driving these solutions, and also by the people who are putting across these problems. As long as these two stakeholders understand each other, technology will help.
Just to follow up to your comments, so if the problem is well known, it means it's probably being driven by the big farmers, so how did the smallholders get their problems heard by the people creating the standards?
By people in the field, I mean, working with the farmers, literally. I think that's one way of taking into account their point of view and bringing that, that view into like the existing tools and technologies that are out there. So so that's what we do at CGA. I think. I hope.
In the UK, there is an initiative called Farm Business Survey. So the Farm Business Survey, I think the idea is there are people who go to the farmers and they talk to the farmers about, they gather a lot of data. But I think if one of the key things that the government wanted to do was get the voices of these smallholding farmers heard, then one of the things, and the Farm Business Survey is run by the government. So they could factor this thing into account and explicitly ask the small holding farmers to write down their problems or to speak about their problems. I don't know how it works in other countries, but at least I know in the UK there is such a thing.
Yeah, and we run survey all the time, so going in the farm and asking questions about or just statistics about the farm. So that's what we do, and a lot of organizations do the same.
I just have to continue on this. There's a lot of initiatives to listen to the smallholder farming. We have projects together with smallholder farming to educate them. So I guess this is just to be continued or to intensify this kind of activities.
Thanks very much. And another question from the audience. What role do you think Agrisemantics can play in biosecurity, in agricultural biosecurity?
Only really big questions today.
What does it mean?
It's to do with biosecurity. So I'm guessing at things like contamination of plants, spread of diseases in animals.
I think there are some activities, if you look at the agro world, like blockchain technology, where actually this can help to trace back on the whole supply chain. And basically, if you can trace back, it's what the consumers now want. If I buy these foods, so what is in there? And it goes back really that the farmer has to document what the farmer did or what's happening there. And I think there's technologies like blockchain, maybe they're pushing this forward.
Sorry, can I ask you a specific question about Brazil? We know that a couple of years ago we had large-scale contamination of meat. Do you think that Agrisemantics could have prevented that on blockchain?
Well, I had thought about it and I was ready to answer the question, and then you...
I'm sorry. Just remind me of the scandal in Brazil.
Yeah, so I had to think, because at first when I heard the word biosecurity, because I work at an institution that fights diseases, I was thinking, about the people actually putting those white suits and going to the farm, and I was like, what does semantic have to do with that? But thinking about how I came to all of this, so my first job analyzing data was to look at patterns of possible disease introductions at a population level by looking at a lot of data. And that's how I came to semantics, the idea that I could only go so far aggregating data and different sources of data unless I did go into semantic tools. So that's my reason to be in the semantic tools is biosecurity at a population level, is detecting, patterns of things that you wouldn't notice if you were one veterinarian in the field, but also put that data at the population level. Then you can detect that something strange is going on. There is an outbreak signal here. And that can only be made more powerful if now you have the weather data, and you have the human data, and you have the animal movement data, and you have the food selling data. And so it depends on what you're monitoring. Of course, yes, it makes it more powerful to analyze data, but if you don't have data about that, I mean, you're talking about Brazil, so when I worked in Brazil, we tested every slaughter batch for Salmonella. every chicken slaughtered bagged for salmonella. Every time we slaughtered chicken, they were tested for salmonella. And then the lab sent me a written report, and my job was to type that report into Excel. I mean, by the time you can actually annotate those data with any semantic tools and look for patterns, it's too late. So yes, the semantic technology can definitely help us with biosecurity because it can put enough data together for you to detect patterns of in my case specifically, I'm thinking about outbreak signals that you wouldn't have been able to notice if you weren't looking at so many sources of data. So the semantic technology, yes, definitely can help biosecurity. But in practice, there is a lot of other problems about data integration that are not just related to the technology.
We're into the last 15 minutes, so I'm going to try to get through more audience questions. So the next question is, there's a lot of hype and focus on health and sustainable food. Consumers want to be well informed about these things. Is there an opportunity for semantic data with respect to these questions?
So, very shamelessly, I would like to point to a couple of my own papers in this area, which is also quite, in some sense, linked to the previous question, because when we are discussing traceability, a couple of years ago, I wrote with Christopher Brewster, who's in the audience, some papers on how the notion of pedigrees can help in achieving traceability from farm right to the supermarket. And these pedigrees were completely driven by ontologies, and they were completely linked data solutions. So Agrisemantics has already helped us in proposing a solution where you can talk about traceability in the food system right from farm to the supermarket. And again, as far as the question here was about the health and how can Agrisemantics help in the health.
Bring up the previous question. Doesn't seem to be, I think it's to do with traceability and to be informed about the sustainable.
Yes, so how can consumers know what's in there? Yeah. So if you have a linked system where information when it moves through the supply chain from farm to the warehouse to storage 1, 2, 3, 4 in different cities, and then finally to the retailers. If all this information is persisted at each of these entities, and then as the product moves on, the links are established between these pieces of information, and at any point in the system, right now maybe a food inspector can query it, but why not the end consumer? If the consumer wanted to know which are the channels through the product they are going to buy or they have bought, which are the channels it moved through, who handled it, who handled the product, and what happened to the product at every stage of handling, they are entitled to this information. So there are solutions already in place, and that's all I can say, because I have worked on them. So.
Sorry, we can move on to the next question, which is, what is the role of semantics in limiting and accelerating the advance of Ag IoT? And as you did the field trials,
So what is currently the limitation?
what's the limitations and how does it improve, for example?
I mean, the first limitation, of course, there is a lot of vendors, a lot of devices developed with different so-called standards or their output, and they have to be connected to each other. So this is maybe one of the challenges you have to face. Then, of course, it depends on the sensor, on the data you collect, because if you have time series data or you have this kind of data, the aggregation you need to analyze certain things, it could be another issue you have to face. And this is maybe also a little bit tricky to answer this with semantic technologies, as we had before, that there's ontology missing. We have to work on this.
So that means the last audience questions that we can ask. It's to do with IoT.
Well, I mean, I have worked with sensor data before, but the semantic sensor network ontology is, I think, the only ontology that we have. But I think we need, specifically for the sensors that are used in the agri-food sector for precision farming, I think those models are not sufficient. They are too upper level, and we need specialized data models and domain models that cover the extent and the scope of what we want to record and measure as part of our sensor data for the agri-food sector. So I think this area certainly needs quite a lot more work.
Yeah, but I think we're going this, that way, like because on the farm, there's more and more sensor for everything. So I think that even if some standards are missing, I think there's going to be when you said that there are so many different brands having their own or tools having their own output and all of that, that's really where semantic technology can really bring something by trying to provide a way to uniformize or harmonize all these different standards by creating something that can be shared amongst all these different output.
Sure, so the technology is there, the solutions have not yet emerged. So
Yeah.
Okay, so we're out of questions from the audience, so I had to create some more. What do you think is lacking in the current state of the art in agri-semantics, and how can we fix it?
So I think from my work in the last couple of months, I think the livestock domain, the livestock part of the agri-food sector still requires some work, but I think both these ladies will be doing some work on that on Thursday, so I think you will take the initiative of getting a working group started in this area.
Or do you want to speak of the crop or the plant? Yeah, I can really speak for the biggest part of it, the plant, and maybe you want to speak about this. But I agree. My experience has been that the livestock part is a bit missing, and I'm really grateful the CGR has a working group on livestock data. And we do have a meeting. This conference provided us an opportunity to get together, and we have a meeting on Thursday to develop the different initiatives that have happened that may not be active, but that could be picked up and can contribute. Where are we going? How do we go there without duplicating efforts, without having efforts that kind of diverge from each other? Monica described this really well. It's like we have to converge to the same place. We have to add value to what each other is doing. Just knowing what each other is doing and have a plan to move forward together, because I think you're right, the livestock is a bit missing there in that equation. So we're hoping to go there.
I maybe will go a little bit further. I mean, what is also missing is the easy accessibility for end users to actually communicate with these kind of technologies. I mean, we might be experts and we don't care about nice user interfaces, nice accessibility, or querying, getting the data out and so on. But I guess this is a hurdle to actually attract more people actually to jump on the train and say, look, we need to actually have more people in working on semantics and solving this kind.
I agree. And as I said before, I think the biggest challenge I have is showing people how this will impact their everyday work, on the way they handle data. When most of my co-workers are opening data in Excel, well, why does this matter to them? Why should they care about this? And if I can convince them, to put their knowledge in an ontology, for instance, how do they consume data that has been annotated? Although I have many user cases of where I wish I could link the data, it's just people can't see how they would do that on their everyday work, when just bringing it to practice has been the biggest challenge. And since you said there are no more questions, I'll take the liberty of
Take as much time as you can.
because I wasn't here last year, but I watched the recording, and unfortunately I don't remember his name, who introduced the panel with a presentation introducing the panel. He said, if you can remember two things from my presentation, is data for purpose and data integration, which really spoke to me, because I'm a bit tired of my field has been quite late in the big data. They're still thinking about big data, but I mean, what's the purpose and how to integrate it? And I didn't know what would be the message of the panel today. I didn't come with a message in my head that I wanted to say, okay, if you remember one thing from this panel, remember this. But after having the panel, it seems to me that if you can remember one thing, is remember your user case, remember who are you building this for, and listen to them, You know, don't decide what you think the field needs. Listen to them. Listen to who is your user case. If you're a company working for one big, I mean, if your user case is a company or it is a big farmer or the big farmers, I mean, that's who you're attending. But someone has to have the small farmer as the user case, and you need to listen to them, and you need to understand how those things come back to them. How does it come back? How, like Nicole said here, I mean, not just not linked data for the sake of linked data, not ontologies for the sake of ontologies. What are you doing this for, and who is your stakeholder? Who has a stake at what you're doing, and are you listening to them? I think is the message I would like to take from here.
I mean, my message would be have faith in Agrisemantics. Don't give up on it yet. It has the potential to solve problems. We just need to go a few more steps further, and I'm sure we will see we'll see very good solutions ahead of us. So have faith.
Yeah.
That's all.
And
I think at the end, if we want to go for precision farming and then everything, at the end, most likely semantics is the glue to help us to connect the different data or the different dots. And I mean, this is where we want to go.
I'll speak for you. To just say, Monica said something really brilliant when you said, I mean, the technology already allows that, is whether people are using the technology for that. So I'm sure I'm speaking name of the panel when I say I'm very thankful for initiatives like the CGR that puts together the people who can solve the problems. And I'm very, very thankful for Godan for, you know, financing, I mean, giving us a chance to have this panel. And Chris mentioned yesterday you have to do a little bit of people engineering as well. And Golden hasn't only financed the panel, I mean, they financed the chance of us getting together yesterday for a dinner, which helped me understand a lot more about the background of these guys and why we were able to say, why don't you answer this and why don't you answer that. So thank you a lot. I think it has been, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about this whole world, and I think, Monica, you said it all. I mean, the technology is there, we just have to, as people, come together and work for the same goals. Yeah.
So we have 4 minutes left, so the final question. What does the panel think is the future of agrisemantics, and will we still be speaking about it in 10 years' time?
I mean, yes. Right? Yes, because we're going to trust it going to work. But yeah, no. So yeah, the future is like, I think we are really at the start. We are totally lagging behind like the life science and the medicine domains, and so we just started. And so we learned a lot for external communities, but I think a lot is also still to be done, particularly to find the, as you said, I mean, developing like the missing tools and all of that can really like prove and showcase what this agrisemantics is going to bring to the table. So yeah, I think, I mean, we're just at the start, and in 10 years it's going to be, yeah, the digital agriculture will be everywhere, and it will be using semantic technology all the way to when then we will be able to do the cool stuff. Yeah.
Cheers to that.
Once again, have faith in Agrisemantics. I hope, if I'm around in the next 10 years, I hope to be doing a lot more semantics, and definitely a lot of it would be Agrisemantics. So, yeah, so that's about it.
I think there will be still a lot of work to do in agriculture, and also linked to sustainability. If it's still called agrisemantics, I don't know. But at least we will use semantics in these kind of
Maybe, yeah. Maybe it won't have a special name, it will just be the de facto way we operate. Yeah, if I have to make a prediction to check myself in 10 years, I mean, we're now going into this whole biosecurity and outbreak detection. We're thinking of One Health, and One Health, I mean, big data has been a big word in the last 10 years. In my field, One Health is the big data of the moment, is bringing together the health of animals, food, people, environment. So maybe in 10 years I can check this recording and see that we are really doing biosecurity and population. We're not talking so much about diseases anymore, we're just talking about health and talking about health in an integrated way, where people don't see themselves and animals and the environment just as providing food, but actually they are part of the environment and we are all part of it. So we really work on a One Health way. That's what I would check.
And I also hope that it is something that becomes implicit. So we do not have to make an explicit effort to talk about semantics. It's something which becomes such an integral part of systems and the way we think about data that it's just second nature. It's just like any other thing that we do. And we don't have to make an effort to bring in semantics and to talk about semantics. It becomes a natural part of the way information systems work.
We're just before 6 o'clock, so I think this is wrapping up time. So I'd like to thank the panel. In particular, I'd like to thank Godan and Chris Baker for organising everything, and be grateful if you give a round of applause for these people.
And we'd like to thank the audience for the fabulous questions they put out.
So thank you everyone, and thank you for attending this session. And I'd like to close the session by specifically thanking all these four panelists who were able to come together, and for moderating, for the moderator and Chris for organizing everything. And on behalf of Godan, we hope this will continue, and this is the start. And we believe Godan, we believe in this Agrisemantics as a way forward, and we hope this is the first step of our journey together. Thank you very much.
Thank you.